All right, so thank you for joining us again. This is the mid-season point of Conversations with the Owl. Thank you so much for tuning in with us each and every week. Vidas, Christian, and myself have been here on Zontar with the man for a week now, and there's still a storm a-brewing outside, so we're hoping to get through it and see what happens, but hey, you know. We're going to talk about horror this week. We're going to talk about Double Chiller, the Channel 10 days, 1974 to 1991, Nite Owl Theatre days. This is what you've all been waiting for, and we're going to have an awesome Double Chiller packed episode. And so let's take it right to the man Fritz with some talk about and discussion about the Channel 10 Nite Owl Theatre version. Now, earlier in the podcast, we had talked about sort of your radio days at 10 TV and the transition, the booth announcer. But as far as when you became Fritz the Nite Owl, let's rehash that a little bit about the name Fritz the Nite Owl and how that all started.
It started because, as I mentioned before, it always bummed me out about movie hosts. They're showing a movie, and they'd come on to do the break before the commercials, and it was, we're watching Vidas and Ride Out for Revenge, we'll be back in a moment. And that was it. Or they would have a guest, like a visiting movie star in, and the host and the movie star would do little bits of interview, maybe 5-10 minutes between parts of the movie, and they were never talking about the movie that was being shown. So it was like having two different shows going at once. And that's when I decided everything I do is somehow going to be related to the movie I'm showing tonight. And the many years I had as a disc jockey, where you have to learn to ad-lib in case the turntables don't work or the cart machines don't work, and you had to fill the time until the engineer could fix it up. You just learned how to ad-lib. And so on Nite Owl, everything I did was ad-lib from notes on a cue card. And it was Nite Owl first. What happened was they had these Dave Wagstaff cartoons of an owl doing different things before they would go into the commercial break. It'd be the owl eating a sandwich or wearing a helmet in a World War II picture or a cowboy hat in a Western, etc., etc. So they would bring on those things, and then the booth announcer would do his thing. And all of them would say, would say nothing about the movie or what just happened in the movie or what was coming up in the movie. Anyway, what happened was a cartoon owl showed, and I would ad-lib with jazz music behind me, something about the movie or the stars, etc., something about the movie. And since people knew my voice from radio, they thought the little cartoon owl on screen that Dave Wagstaff created was me. And Fritz the Nite Owl started to get fan mail before there was an official Fritz the Nite Owl. And then John Haldy just said, well, the mail is they want to see Fritz the Nite Owl on TV. Let's put him on. So the first time they put me on was I was in the announce booth, which was a glass thing, and it was the studio was all dark, and they took a long shot of the announce booth, and they had the microphone right in front of my face, so you couldn't see it because they didn't have the glasses then. So we went from that to a thing where they had two owl eyes set permanently on the screen, and I would sit there and they'd match those eyes up with my silhouette because I was all in the dark.
So how many, was this for several weeks or was this for?
Oh, this was for each visual behind the mic, and the owl eyes were a couple of weeks each before the glasses came on, and that's said to be the trademark for Nite Owl Theatre.
And I don't know if we talked about this. How did the glasses come about? I don't know if we talked about this already, but.
Well, John Haldy, Dave Wagstaff and I were, okay, how do we present the owl? One of the ideas was like in an owl suit like the San Diego chicken. And since the announcer on duty or the personalities had to do commercials, if they fell in your shift and it was a live commercial, the announcer, and they didn't have an announcer come in to do it, the announcer on duty had to do it. And they just said, we can't see a guy in an owl suit standing in front of a Buick, an expensive product. It would just be inconsistent. Now, they didn't have a problem with Flippo because for years a clown, for some reason, was regarded as a sales symbol, primarily on the things like Circus of Values and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So and then so we discarded the clown suit or the chicken suit, talked about this, that, and the other, and the big glasses. Elton John that was one of his trademarks, and Dave Wagstaff said, why don't we get the big frames and put owl horns on them, and that will be. I was astounded at how much, when I was without the glasses on the street, people did not recognize me. And I never realized that glasses made that much of a difference in the visual interpretation. And people, when they would see me, they wouldn't recognize me. But when I talked, then they would say, you sound like, or are you? And we would go from there. A lot of times I would lie and say, no, it's my brother.
So now is that why you understand now how Clark Kent and
I was just about to
Superman,
say, yeah.
they were just, it was the glasses and they just had no idea.
And a little S curl on his.
Right.
Yeah, Clark
Right.
Kent didn't have the little S curve.
That's right. That's right.
See,
So
one of the reasons that, again, the original Fawcett publications, Captain Marvel, was so popular was that a kid, you're 7, 8 years old reading, you believe, and Captain Marvel used to, if you were in the Captain Marvel Club, they'd send you a letter about every month or two. And so you really believe there was a Captain Marvel. And to be Superman, you had to come from another planet. To be Captain America, you had to be on a operating table and get some kind of injections.
Right.
To be Batman, you had to be a great athlete. But for Billy Batson, Captain Marvel, it was a magic word.
Right.
One word, and it changes from the kid to the adult.
Right.
And we all believed that we had a magic word, and it was just finding the right word. So I hunted for mine till I was about 9 years old,
Right.
I guess.
That's great.
That's awesome. So like when the show started up and you were on camera, which will be the footage of you in front of the tower, like on a tower set with the red and white tower, correct?
Right.
The early stuff, where you had some killer shirts, as people will see in the vintage footage and the set that's coming out next year. But your wardrobe was your own, correct? You can kind of bring it into work. And the glasses were, of course,
right.
You put the glasses on there with character. But Double Chiller, which was the most popular night, didn't actually start yet, correct? Until early 80s maybe, or late 70s?
I think late 70s. Well, there was a Friday night horror movie on before Nite Owl started. Monday through Thursday, it was Armchair Theater with Dan Immel. And then Friday night, the show had a horror title, and Dan Immel still hosted it. But I can't think of what the title was. And then Dan got moved to another city, and they just did the Nite Owl thing. They had somehow set a rat on a table with a candle, and the rat runs around and gets singed by the candle and runs off, and the announcer on duty just had to say, this is Nite Owl Theater. And it was like that until they made Nite Owl Theater Friday night, and then because it got so popular, they just eliminated the words Armchair Theater and Sunday Night Theater and Saturday Night Movie, just made all 7 nights of the week Nite Owl Theater.
Yeah, a fan of ours actually emailed me and is putting together, he went to the archives of the Dispatch downtown at the library, and he was looking through microfilm and all these things, and he has sent me a episode guide from the beginning of Nite Owl Theatre all the way up through 1987 as of now, and he's trying to complete it, and he sent me the documents that say what movies were on every week.
Are you serious?
And so I have the dates and the times, and it looks like that in the beginning, in 74...
Were they from TV Guide or the newspaper?
Yeah, it was from the Dispatch listing for Channel 10.
Okay.
So he'd look it up, and it'll say, okay, Fritz is showing this movie tonight or whatever.
Astounding.
And what's neat is, so he's sending this to me, and this is all going to be in an upcoming book that we're going to release for Nite Owl's 50th anniversary. But he sent these to me, and I'm looking through them, and it appears that in 1974, when Nite Owl Theatre went on the air first, that it was only Saturday nights, at least for like 6 months or so, and then it became nightly.
Right.
But,
and moved to Friday night.
Or it moved to Friday, yeah. And so I'm reading some of this stuff, but a lot of it, and I know that a lot of our audience knows this, but some of the packages of movies that they got, part of Nite Owl Theatre sometimes was Spider-Man, the TV show, or Magnum P.I., or things like that. And so would it be like that would kick off the night, and then movies would follow, the double features would follow after, or was it just a single feature on weeknights and then double chiller on Fridays?
Well, the single feature Monday through Thursday could have been any type of movie, a Western, a drama, a comedy, love story, could have been anything. And the Friday night was the only night that was reserved for one type of movie, and that was reserved way before Nite Owl started. Friday night, for some reason, was the night they would show. I think they started with a double chiller. I think it was called Double Chiller Theater. Now that I think,
well, yeah, I think it was Chiller Theater with Dan Emmel, right? The original host of Chiller Theater, yeah.
And then I think they started the Double Chiller before Nite Owl. This is one of the things in this interview. If I pause, it's because in all of those years, so long ago, I literally have forgotten what I did. I might be telling you about one of my favorite movie stars, and all of a sudden I can't think of his or her name. And so if you get those long pauses, that's geezerdom. Just give me a couple of seconds to see if I can remember or not remember.
Well, we appreciate you doing this live with us, so that's the beauty of live.
Yeah, this is live. Well, actually, Nite Owl Theatre 5 nights a week was live.
Exactly.
Right.
When you were a young spring chicken.
Yeah,
instead of an owl.
Well, no, I liked those hours because, A, I missed all of the traffic. I had an easy parking, and there was only 4 of us in the whole building. There was a guy called the switcher. There was me. There was a film and slide projectionist, and the janitor. And we were the only 4. That was before news was all night. We were the only ones in the station.
So did they ever, like, did anybody else on the team suggest anything? Were they ever... Were you like, did they say, hey, this, maybe we should try this for this movie?
Oh, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Many, many times. Some of the electronic stuff was one of the engineers would discover it by accident or create it by accident, and they call me in and show it to me. Do you want to use it? Yes. And I would wait for a movie that it would be appropriate.
That's cool.
To. And a lot of times I would come in and say, this is the effect I want, blah, 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 blah. And then one of the engineers, particularly a guy named Eric Hartzell and Randy Nice, would come up with ways to vastly improve the visuals I had presented. So there was a lot of exterior input to what I originally suggested.
So when it came to creating, these segments, did you guys meet in the afternoons, or like, how did it go with you? If you're pitching your idea, or or they're pitching their ideas to you, when did that happen? Did it happen that day or that evening, like half an hour before you go up, or before you filmed, or what?
No, every 5 nights a week, I would go in to the station, and if I was still the booth, well, actually no, I would go into the station and I would research the movies, and decide what was going to be my visual. And I'd make up my little note idiot cards for each night. And then I would go in and I would tell the engineers what I wanted. And they many times had an improvement on the visual eye. Like the one where you see me swimming with the fish. In my version, I'd have just been swimming and the fish would have been behind me. Well, Eric Hartzell figured out a way to make it so there is the fish behind me, I'm swimming, and then there's fish swimming in front of me.
Okay.
And, you know, I don't know how he did it, but that made the effect so much better.
Right.
And so that's how it happened. I never had a meeting with anybody as to what was going to be presented or what I was going to say or what I was going to look like or what the visual was. It would happen the night of the taping.
So you would have that conversation that day for that evening's taping?
I would do it while when it was like time to tape the Tuesday night segment. I would say, I want to do blah, blah, blah. And one of the guys would say, hey, well, why don't you do that, but we can do this, this, this. And I'd say, well, okay, let's do that.
Oh, okay.
So it happened spontaneously.
Okay.
There was also a story you told me that, is it true that when Channel 10 would get a new machine in that produced maybe a new effect or a new special effects rig, that they would be like, give it to Fritz to test or let you guys break it in?
Well, what happened was a lot of the effects that were on the new thing were not used on all of the other programs. And these engineers like to play around, and so they would discover an effect, and then they would show it to me, and I'd say, okay, we can use that. And then I would figure out, okay, what movie are we going to use that effect in? And but we never had an official meeting.
Okay.
One of the guys would just come up and say, hey, take a look at this, and they'd show me, and I'd either say yay or nay, and that was it.
That's pretty cool.
So here's an interesting question. Did you ever, well, I guess if you prepped it before you went live, then no, but did you ever have an effect or something that you were like, nah, I didn't like that, or that didn't turn out the way that I wanted to, so you just never used it again? Or were there trial and errors like that, or was?
Oh yes,
like,
yes, there were, not a lot of them, but there were some times we would do an effect, and as I say, when I was doing Nite Owl, I could actually see me in the effect at the time. So if I didn't like it, we'd kill it. And many times, and in a lot of ways, that's why the tower set was on a night when I couldn't come up with a good visual relating to the movie. That's why the Nite Owl was still on the tower.
oh, okay, got
So
it.
that was a base set, but it was used only when I couldn't come up with something.
Well, I know it was so creative, like when you did the Illustrated Man, you came up with the idea of your entire torso having a movie playing on it.
Yeah.
But not on it, but instead of.
On the body.
There's
Yeah.
Wait, The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury? Sorry.
I forget who was.
Oh, no, you're fine.
Is that
Can't cut anything. It's live.
Yeah. So what I did was I dressed all in blue, which was the chroma key color we were using then instead of green, all in blue, so that when I talked about the Illustrated Man and how it was impossible to have that many things, they're running a movie, and that movie is showing up on all of the blue parts of my body. But unlike a regular tattoo, they're moving around, and that's how I was able to relate that special effect to that particular movie.
Were they showing the actual Illustrated Man movie, or did you just get stock footage to
the projection? Just picked something out of stock footage.
That's awesome.
So it looked good on screen, so I said, let's use it. And I was hoping that they would have used one of the cartoons, like one of the Bugs Bunnies, because they had the
literally Illustrated
Yeah.
Man. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
So for Nite Owl, which ones were live? Were there any nights that were like live, or were they all pre-taped?
Did you work 5 and then get 2 days off, or how did that work?
I worked 5 and I got 2 days off, And the visual parts of Nite Owl, there were 3 per night,
Right.
4 on Friday, and we would pre-tape all of those in 1 2-hour session on a Saturday night after the 6 o'clock news, but we had to be done in time for the 11 o'clock news. So we would there were 3 or 4 breaks on camera, so we'd pre-tape those, but then the ones that was just the owl cartoon and the jazz, those were done live.
So you have to be there for those.
Sitting.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, you were there every broadcast, right?
Oh yeah, I
Except
was.
for the 2 days.
I was there for every broadcast, but
So you were actually watching the movie with us, literally.
well, that was one of the things people said that they liked about it, was that they felt that they would say, well, you said what I would have said to somebody had they been in the room
Right.
with us.
Yeah,
you know?
it's like a communal experience.
That's why I was afraid of the movie thing, because when I thought of the movie audience, which is a whole theater full of people who don't know each other, that intimacy would be lost.
Oh, for the 2010
For-
launch.
when we
Yeah, for
did
the
it,
2010
right.
new version, yeah. And so ultimately, the first
Just a
couple
bigger living room.
the first couple of movies, we did it like Nite Owl with the 3 breaks
Yeah.
and 2 voiceovers. And there were 4 voiceovers, actually. There was a middle, 2 voiceover, or correct. There was an open, 2 voiceovers, a middle on camera, 2 more voiceovers, and an on-camera close.
There were 7 breaks, 4 off camera,
Yeah.
3 on.
And
That was our first 3 episodes.
quite frankly, the voice-over ones just didn't work in the theater. So Mike gradually increased. We didn't increase all of them at once, but we went to where there were more. And by the end of the first season, all of the breaks were on camera.
Yeah, we went from the first 3 episodes were 3 times on camera each. Starting with House on Haunted Hill for episode 4, we went to 5 breaks out of 7 and then 2 off. And then Metropolis was our season 1 finale, and that's just such a special movie to like Rome, our writer, and then it's visually it's so special that we did all 7 on camera. Then when we came back for season 2, we went back to the 5 on and the 2 off, and Rome had created actual moving illustrations at that point. And that I know some of you listening haven't seen our second season a whole lot, but the breaks were sort of like Last Man on Earth. There'd be like a zombie and then the cartoon owl, and the zombie would be like waving its arms and you're narrating over it. And so we only had 2 of those per episode in season 2.
Well, I was about to say, and this was one of the things I was afraid of at the Ohio, was that we in the first year or 2 we would show the actual commercials that would have run in those days.
Yes.
And
Yeah, that was
It
part.
that was part of the original couple of years. And then we had my breaks, and we cut out for the visual commentary on the film to that point, but Mike would eliminate the commercials.
Right.
So there'd be film, there'd be me in the film, and then there'd be more of the feature.
Yeah.
But the parts where I was on camera, the 7 times I was on camera, normally at Channel 10 there would have been 4 commercials that followed my appearance, and then more movie.
Yeah. So I mean, the TV commercials were sort of. I wanted it to feel, especially our first 2 seasons, I wanted it to feel like you're watching it on television still. Like we went back to the 70s. And the problem was a lot of those commercials I had pulled from YouTube and various sources, and when it came time to release them, if you have our early DVDs or something, you still have the commercial breaks. But it was when we moved to the bigger movies where I still kept commercials, more themed to the movie. But then I just realized that, if we had graduated to cable, for instance, and even Joe Bob Briggs now on Shudder, it's movie, then him, then movie, then him. There's no commercials. And I think it was like, okay, what would Nite Owl look like if it went to cable? Also, not having the rights to, not knowing who even owns half those commercials. I just kind of started gradually phasing them out so we can be less of, we're watching Fritz on network TV and more if we're watching Fritz on HBO.
Yeah, I was just afraid that people will say, okay, he's on camera. Why is he on camera in the 1/3 of the way through the film? But I was on camera because the original Nite Owl Theatre would have been followed by commercials. And I should mention that a lot of times the commercials from way back when would get a huge response.
Yeah.
Those were a fun part for
They were
sure.
fun.
Well,
but,
I remember for Jaws was the Roy Scheider coffee commercial.
Yeah.
That was great. There was the Harrison Ford, I think it was
Japanese
Blade Runner.
beer commercial?
The Japanese beer commercial. And I really felt like it was more, we got a full experience where I had no idea. I've seen Blade Runner a zillion times, but the commercial breaks made it like I don't even know what's happening next. And so what commercial is Mike going to put in here? And that was the fun part of it.
And a lot of times there were products that no longer exist.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, so that's the point. Is
Right.
if you put commercials up for products that no longer exist, who cares who owns it? You know what I mean? Because in a way,
What are they
it's
gonna
like
do?
these are never going to be seen again. We're not selling tickets for the commercials. We're just adding to this experience. But I did get complaints that, and I've learned to listen to less of these complaints now, but I did get complaints that, Nite Owl's running too long. It's going well past the 2 a.m. mark.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And if you remove the commercials suggested by someone we were working with, it just ends up, being better for the audience to get home in time. And as we went and did this new series, when it started, you couldn't keep people home. But I think the problem was knowing it was monthly, knowing you could come see it whenever. People started to feel how late we were running it. Now, I wanted to run it that late because of authenticity. I wanted it to be the same time. Right. And the problem was, I don't think people are made to stay out that late. And my excuse would always be, Fritz is older than all of you, and he stays out that late.
That's right. You were at every. Did you go to every single showing
up until 2018?
Almost all of them. I think I missed two or three.
5 maybe.
Missed five in I forget how many years.
Right.
But
8.
I should mention that all of the movies, the old ones, the new ones, the public domain ones, all of them except 2 were picked by Mike, and I wanted to pick 2. And I picked the Steve Reeves Hercules.
Okay.
And Charade with Cary Grant and, who's the lady?
Audrey Hepburn. Love of my life.
Right. And supporting actors after the title were Walter Matthau and James Coburn and so forth.
George Kennedy.
And we thought, well, why would a movie like this be public domain? But whoever owned it originally forgot to renew the copyright. Sure. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, I figured people would love to see the first Hercules movie because that was the start of the sword and sandal thing. Maybe 5 people showed up,
Right.
and for Charade it was the same thing. Right. So I said, I'm shutting my mouth.
Which I will say, the Charade episode is hands down. Tobias Rediger actually directed that episode.
Well, that helped us win an Emmy.
Oh, yeah, well, and it did, and that episode won Fritz an Emmy, and the episode I won for was Little Shop of Horrors, and so, like, in our later years. So the thing is, Charade, I don't care if 7 people showed up to that. That movie is flawless. That episode is incredible. And I'm kind of, I was never, now that we're being candid in the podcast, it's like, man, it hurt that only a few people got to see that episode. So I can't wait for all of you to see it on the set.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if Charade is still public domain because they do show it on some of the cable stations. I think
it is. Yeah, it is, and they do show public domain. I mean, they still show Night of the Living Dead, but when movies are restored or like someone makes a special edition that's their own, they can copyright that print. Is how it is. So the movie. There are Charade public domain. I mean, the only ones we can use are the public domain films, but that's why the sets we release are like the full episode.
The only 2 movies that I wanted to show, and they were, all you could get was a crappy print, so we didn't show it, was The Red House with Edward G. Robinson and the Flash Gordon serials that were made into one movie called Rocket Ship.
Okay.
And those were the only 2 that I wanted to show that we didn't.
I used to have a list of what our season 3 would have been had we not collaborated with Michael Dougherty to do Trick or Treat, and then go onward with Jaws and Blade Runner and Shining and all that. And we had like the Outlaw. We had the Red House and Rocket Ship, but we had the Outlaw with Jane Russell. We had what was the Fritz Lang? We always wanted to end with a Fritz Lang movie.
Metropolis.
Well, we ended with Metropolis season 1. We ended with M season 2. Season 3 would have ended with Scarlet Street by Fritz Lang.
Oh yeah.
So basically, like, I always wanted to end every season with Fritz Lang. And then when we got the chance to do the bigger episodes, we did have to make a hard decision of we can't release these to home media so you all can watch them in your living rooms, but it does take Nite Owl to a theatrical level by going Blade Runner and everything. And I think that was the moment where the kid in me got excited because this was our chance to now make Nite Owl our own show and take it off the network TV, bring it into theaters for you. And that's when I started kind of dropping commercials. I had them for like the first year, but then we sort of phased that out to where it feels like you're watching, HBO at the movies, which I think Fritz deserves because there's just no other host like him. So sorry to kiss your butt on the air, but
so were there any films that Mike chose that you did not want to do?
Yes. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians. Santa Claus.
We had a small list to choose from.
Yeah.
The only reason I chose Santa Claus, I mean, it sucks, but the thing is like
Meets the Martians. Though.
Yeah.
It was the first movie for Pia Zadora, and that movie was just wretched. And I hate because Channel 4 had it before Nite Owl got it. That is, it expired on Channel 4, and then BNS bought a package. Right. And Santa Claus Conquers the Martians was... Well, I hated it when Jerry Beck at Channel 4 showed it when Channel 4 owned the rights. Couldn't stand it. And Jerry and I would talk about this and kid about some of the wretched movies we had.
Right.
But I think that was the only one that...
It was the only Christmas public domain movie, and since we had just launched, I was trying to think of.
I can't think of other movies that I said I don't want to show this one.
I know one, and I know what you're going to say, and I'm going to say it because I get to own this moment because I love this movie, and everyone hated it but me, and that's The Goonies.
Oh yeah.
See?
Yeah.
See? Both of you, first off, including Mark Miller, the late great Mark Miller who wrote the episode, also hated the movie
too. Right.
On the other hand, we did a great job with it.
But what was why didn't you like it, Fritz? What did you say?
I sort of cringe at movies that the main characters are preteens or teenagers.
Who scream all the time? Didn't you say they yell the entire movie?
He said there's just a bunch of kids screaming all the time. So
and
then,
he's right. He's absolutely right.
So then when I talked to Mark Miller about writing the episode, who was an English teacher, Mark said to me, away from Fritz, and they did not converse about it, Mark said, yeah, but it's just a bunch of kids screaming. Right. And I'm realizing that like what I thought was one of the most hailed achievements in modern cinema, all of a sudden everyone around me is like, it's just a bunch of kids screaming, and they killed my childhood.
What's great is that like visually, and the writing is great. Visually, it's a wonderful movie when we did it.
Yeah.
But I can hear the disdain for that movie in the writing and in your delivery. Like you can just tell that you guys
you guys are a bunch of assholes. We are.
Because as I'm watching it, I'm like, you can tell Mark Miller does not like this movie, and the way you were reading the lines, it's like you could totally tell.
Tongue was so far in my cheek it was coming out my ear.
Right. Yeah.
There was a moment where I wanted to do every Corey Feldman movie for Nite Owl because there's something about him, and again, I'll use the Tom Cruise example. Him as a person, whatever, crazy, not crazy, I don't know. He's eccentric. But as a professional actor, every movie he's been in is great. And when I think about Corey Feldman and think about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Stand By Me, The Goonies, Friday the 13th 4, which some people say is the best one, you go through all these, and I'm like, if Feldman's a part of it, it's my childhood. And the difference was, I'm not making this show for me. I'm making it for a Fritz audience.
Right.
And The Goonies was my selfish,
you still had a great selection of films, which all of them were successful other than Hercules and Charade, which were two two that I picked.
But I'll stand by Charade for. I mean that's
yeah.
such a great move. In fact, if you not picked it, I would have never saw Charade. The first time I saw it was for Nite Owl when we were planning the episode.
So the first time that I know we're leaving the whole Channel 10 thing. Is that all right?
This is fine. You know what? We'll do it live.
So when I don't know if we talked about this already, but when you came back as Fritz the Nite Owl.
In the 21st century?
Yes. Like when it was for Night of the Living Dead, is that the first thing?
That was our first episode, yeah.
And you thought no one was going to be there.
Right.
Now, and I was not there for this because I was not a part of this.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
It's weird to think that there was a time where Vidas was not a part of
it. Because you asked me to come on.
Raiders. No, Blade Runner. No,
Jaws. But it was before that where you said, hey, I'm working on this thing for Fritz the Nite Owl, and I'm like, who's Fritz the Nite Owl?
Well, yeah, because you grew up with Goulardi. Well, not with
with Big Chuck and Little John up in Cleveland, yeah. And so, but I learned though that when you came out, or when you had your first showing, you thought no one was going to be there, right?
Right.
And you came out, and there was like the crowd went crazy, right?
Yeah, we got a friend of Dino Chipotas, our producer. He had a friend who owned a limo company, and so we sent the limo to pick up Fritz and his family here on Zontar and drive them to Columbus, Ohio,
all the way,
because the limo flew.
Right. Yeah.
Like you know how the duck can drive across water, well, the limo flew, and it flew on to Grandview Theater. And the thing is, the nerves that Fritz had, I bet, were amplified because, and you can back this up, Fritz, if you want. But the thing is he's coming to a show and he's not sure there's people there. I was already in the building and saw it was sold out, and we did not get to communicate or call each other as he was on his way. But his family, I was texting his family saying, "Oh my God, it's sold out." And Fritz and I came up with a word where when I'm giving my speech, I mean, we went so far as to tell the dispatch and everybody. He did interviews, and they said, "Are you going to be there?" And he said, "Probably not. I'm just in my own." And so we threw everyone for a loop, and I introed the episode myself to the audience.
Sure.
And I talked about how I was a Nite Owl fan and all this. And when I said a certain phrase, he was standing in the wings, literally waiting to interrupt me. So when I said it, he came out, and people just standing ovation. I mean, they lost their shit. It was awesome.
It's surprising. Even when he was doing the intro and I'm backstage, I can't see the crowd.
Right.
So when I walked out, I was just astounded at the audience reaction and the size of the audience.
So before that, you thought there's going to be 5 people there.
Yeah.
And they were 263.
And it was sold out.
Yeah.
So that must have been an awesome night.
Well, it was awesome, and I said my mea culpas to my family and to Mike and to Dino and to Andy Man had passed on, so I couldn't thank him.
Right.
But I said, okay, that proved your point and disproved mine, so we'll do it.
So I have to ask you, and this isn't for personal reasons or anything, but Vidas and I came along late in your career. I know you enjoyed, did the thrill of the audience cheering for you, did that motivate you more to do more? I mean, like was that a positive in terms of?
Very, 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 very positive. People you see on, Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and that, most of them, and we're talking about big stars, big athletes, big politicians, they all mention how much when they walk out and they get their applause, how energizing that is to know that what it is you do, all of these people like, and that you're doing something creatively that they've never seen before or that's new or is going to make their lives better. You feel it.
Oh, sure.
I got to mention, and we did this before, one year there was a jazz festival at the Ohio State Fair, 3 nights, and I was one of the MCs. And in those days, they had a covered pavilion. They had the stage, and then there was a grassy place, then there was the horse race track, and then there was this covered pavilion, well, just a roof, and then a whole bunch of empty seats on the side. And the voiceover announcer over the loudspeaker system introduced me, and I went out, and there was this huge applause and yelling and everything like that. And it literally felt like a physical wave.
That's wonderful.
That sound was like a physical wave that went over me.
That's absolutely wonderful. That's wonderful.
And it was so I couldn't remember whether I was good or bad.
Right.
Pat said I was good, and this guy came up to me at the end of the show. He said, Were you the host?" I said, "Yeah." And he hands me this envelope. Well, I don't want to be uncool and open it there. So when we get back to the car, I said to him, "The guy gave me this," and I opened it up, and there's $100 in there.
Oh.
I didn't realize I was getting. I thought I was doing.
See, nowadays they give you 100. That means you sucked.
Right.
Yeah. No. Well, but I mean, in those days, 100 was big cash.
Oh, yeah,
sure,
absolutely.
And
Shit.
what it was that I thought I was doing it, and the guys from Cleveland were doing it, and I forget where the other city was, but I thought we were just doing it to promote our show, our radio shows in town.
Right.
Yeah.
Had no idea I was going to get paid for it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I do have a question going back to the Channel 10 days.
Okay.
So, because I don't know if people want to know these things, but so you were on for 17 years, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
74 to 91 and a half.
So did it end on a whimper? Did it end like how did Nite Owl at Channel 10 end? Was it just
I got fired. They got John Hawley retired, and the new guy they brought in. First thing he says to me, "How are you? Glad to meet." First thing he says to me is, "I want you to know I don't like movies on television." And a week.
How long after he said that?
A week. About 2 weeks later, 14 of us got fired.
You and everybody associated with the show, including art department, right?
Well, more than there were people that were associated with other shows. It was a very diverse crowd that you couldn't say it was. You couldn't say it was a certain nationality that got kicked out. It was a certain age that was asked to be fired. It wasn't. It was just a combination of ages, ethnicity, and what they were paying you and what your show was. And they had such a diverse crowd, nobody could sue for being unfairly fired.
When you were fired, did you have a? Oh, that's right. You didn't do you did more handshakes, right? Because did your contract, was it for longer than when you got terminated, or was it?
I never had a contract with either WBNS radio or television. It was just
back in the days. It was a handshake, right?
It was just a handshake, and
unbelievable.
Yeah. Don't say blank on the air.
That's amazing. I mean, nowadays, no one even has a conversation without a contract.
So,
and it's usually an NDA you sign first.
Well, actually, I got hired because my older brother actually had the job that I was hired for, but he was in the National Guard Reserve, and they had meetings on, I think it was a Wednesday night. And so my older brother goes to the head of this department and says, "I've got to do blah, 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 National Guard. Is it all right if my younger brother sits in for me that night?" Again, the guy just says, "Yeah, that's fine, as long as he's reasonably intelligent and will."
Which you are. You're reasonably.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I started off as a fill-in for my older brother. And then, I answered the phone one night. It was a switchboard where if you were in your office, you'd call down to me at the switchboard and say, "I want an outside line." I give you an outside line. So Bill Pepper called, who was the head newscaster. He calls, and he wants a line. And so I tell him, "Yes, Mr. Pepper, thank you." And he says, "Hey, Chuck, what are you doing down there?" And I said, "Well, I'm not Chuck." Chuck was another staff announcer at Vienna. Apparently, we sounded like, and he said, "I want to see you after my show." And I thought, God, what did I do? And he came out and he told me he thought what a great voice I had, and I should pursue radio, TV, and theater more.
Now, when you became the Nite Owl, did your brother, who kind of gave you the job, was he like happy, or was he like, "Oh, you son of a bitch"?
No. By the time I became the Nite Owl, my older and younger brother were both on active duty, and my older brother was in Vietnam, and my younger brother was commanding a destroyer in the Mediterranean somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I wrote a short story that was published in Rogue magazine, and my older brother said when those magazines hit Vietnam, he said he had maybe 200 people coming up and saying, "Hey, are you related to this?" Because we've got an unusual last name.
Sure.
And they come up and ask him about, did I write the story? And I did.
Awesome. That's great.
That's amazing. No, it's this whole experience working with you. I'm sure Vidas can attest to this, but like it's been unreal because like the thing is like watching you growing up, and I only caught your last 5 years, and then the audience that came to these live shows watched you growing up, and to have you sort of jump out of the television, I'm sure a lot of people, like when I was a kid, I thought you were in Hollywood, because to me, if you were on television,
Don't I wish?
well, yeah, but if you were on television, I didn't know what local, I mean, I was real little when I started watching, like maybe 5, and so the thing is that for you to be there for 8 straight years at all of our shows and on screen, these fans really got a chance to sort of like take this to the next level. And I think that's, I don't even think, me making this show, I didn't know what it would become. I knew you had a fan base, but I'm not saying I bullshitted you, but when I talked to you about doing the show, I wanted to do it for what I remembered. I had no idea if the fans were out there. I knew that Fritz the Nite Owl had fans. I didn't know if they'd come out of their houses at midnight. And that was the thing, is so I was as shocked as you, but also just like smiling ear to ear because you got to now experience a different way of doing this than you did in the 70s.
Yeah, well, like I say, when I was doing radio before Nite Owl, and I would MC a show at like the Ohio Theater or the Palace or some high school or wherever, I would have a few people come up and say, they enjoyed the jazz show that I did, and that was nice. But I was amazed. I was amazed at how people who didn't recognize me with the glasses recognized me by voice when I was just civilian, when I was the Bruce Wayne version of
Right.
Fritz the Nite Owl. So this all goes back to the live audience. Absolutely. It's a physical, you actually feel, it's like a physical high.
Oh, yeah.
You just literally
Right.
go for it.
I think I've told you this, and I don't know if I said it before in other podcasts, when I tell people I write for Fritz the Nite Owl and they lose their minds. And then, but going to Studio 35 when we had our showings, and my friends would come with me and they would say, like, can I get a picture with Fritz? And I'm like, well, I'm not his agent, but, yeah. And so I would introduce my friends to you. You take, you'd be very polite, take some, pictures. And then I've had people say, I made out with the girl for the first time while Fritz the Nite Owl was on TV. Mm-hmm. I've had those like experiences. And then I remember one time we went out to Horror Hound and we were at a burger place. And I said, hey, Fritz, can you call my friend?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And
Carmel, Indiana is where we were.
That's right, yeah. And I remember because it was the night before Horror Hound, and I was out with some friends, and they said, oh, what are you doing this weekend? And I said, oh, I'm going to Horror Hound. And they said, for what? And I said, well, with Fritz the Nite Owl. And it was like the record stopped. And they were like, wait, you know Fritz the Nite Owl? And I said, well, yeah, I write, for the show. And it was like I said I knew Elvis, the way that they reacted.
Well, that's what's great is when you came into this not knowing who he was.
Right. But
and then discovering when you're already doing it, like, oh, this is the thing.
Right, but it's basically like based on other people's reactions. And then I remember we went out to, we were at a burger joint, and I said, hey, Fritz, would you mind calling my friend? And we called my friend, and he did not answer. He was at his son's baseball game. You got the machine, and you left a message. And then my phone, I just got a message that said, oh my God, Fritz the Nite Owl just called me.
What if he saved that
message? So he said, I'm saving this message, because it was such a thrill for him. Because he's like, I grew up, watching this guy as a kid. Because everybody my age, I'm 50 years old. I think a lot of people my age grew up, when they were kids all through their teenage years, they watched you.
Well, I wanted to be a star where like the whole world knew me. And while I didn't quite make that level, I was pleased that one of the things I wanted to do as a kid, I did get the Nite Owl thing that had the audience react.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
always wanted, whatever I did, I wanted people to like it and say, wow, I've never seen that before. And that was one of the things I liked about Nite Owl, is no other movie host on the planet was even doing it remotely close to the way visual and audio that I was doing it.
Well, the effect that you had, like one of my neighbors said with his family, every Friday for Double Chiller, theater, every Friday they would make popcorn as a family.
Right.
And sit there and, it became, the kids, he's like, I don't know if the kids ever made it to the second film, but it was a tradition in their family. Like, you're part of the tradition of their family. You were interwoven.
Well, I did hear from a lot of people that as kids, their parents would not allow them to stay up. And when the parents went to sleep, the kids would get up and, and watch the movies or watch it under the sheets and so forth. So,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the thing that...
and, of course, older people who would bring their kids to the movie, like they would say, this is what I watched when I was your age.
Right.
And it turned out most of those kids thought it was terrific.
Yeah.
Well, that was my goal of picking the movies that are a bit more contemporary. Is they're movies that were loved by the adults when they were kids, but they're cool enough movies to still be relevant, so that their kids that come with them, like if it's a movie like Labyrinth with David Bowie, the kids would come with them and be like, "Oh, I love this movie," and the adults can say, "Yeah, I watched this as a kid," but it's right in that magic spot of 80s, late 70s, all the way through 80s, and then early 90s to be. I mean, when we did Scream, it was huge. And the thing is like that's one of the newest movies I think we did was Scream. And when we did Scream, it was sort of like you have those kids now that love that franchise.
No.
And it was just old enough to be,
Right.
relevant.
Coincidentally, I forget how much in advance, how many weeks we taped the movie in advance. But
Usually
I remember
4.
one of the sad moments was we showed the David Bowie movie 2 or 3 days before he died, or 2 or 3 days
So it
afterwards.
was 2 weeks to the day after David Bowie passed. We premiered our Dawn of the Dead episode, which was supposed to be us introducing with George Romero.
Mm-hmm.
When it was booked, that was what it was for. So we were asked to do Dawn of the Dead. We shot it, and when we showed it, Romero was sick in the hospital, and Ken Foray stepped in and did it with us. And Romero passed away 2 weeks to the day after that screening. Then when we did A Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven passed away 2 weeks to the day before we did Nightmare on Elm Street.
Wow.
I don't like it. It's weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
But we just,
Well, as I say, I'm glad that the show had that kind of effect on people. One of Mark Miller spent a long time in the hospital, and he said every night that was his big thing for the day, was waiting for Nite Owl to come on at night, and that's how we met. He became a teacher at
Hilliard?
Gahanna Lincoln.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he well, not only
And
that,
he
Gahanna
he
Lincoln
wrote
had
a
film
couple.
program.
Yeah.
He wrote a couple
So he was-
books.
Oh yeah, he
Yeah.
had a film program.
Film program or film teacher and English teacher.
English teacher,
And he wrote
yeah.
the official bios on Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and knew them personally
Right.
as friends, which was insane that he worked for us. And then Mark told me a great story where he's a big Barbara Steele fan, and he kind of stalked her out in L.A. He was with his wife, and he somehow got Barbara Steele's address. And his wife and him were about to come home from L.A., and he said, "There's one last thing I want to do. I want to go knock on Barbara Steele's door and say hi." And his wife was like, "That's insane, and you shouldn't do that." And he drove to the thing, and his wife is absolutely pissed at him. And he walks up to the door, knocks on the door, and I'm going to tell this from Teresa's point of view. She sees her husband knock on Barbara Steele's door. She sees the door open, and Mark talks for a little bit, and then all of a sudden he goes in. And 10, 15 minutes go by before Mark comes out and motions Teresa in. Barbara Steele had invited them in for tea.
Oh.
And
wow.
and they got to sit down for an hour and just chat with her. Mm-hmm. I just saw Barbara Steele recently at a convention. You cannot do that now.
Yeah, sure, right, yeah.
No, but like I say, one of the things that was a fringe benefit was I've always been starstruck, still am. One of the fringe benefits was meeting these people, but more than that, most of them would chat with us longer, rather than just writing, "Thanks, I'm glad you liked the show," and giving you the autograph. Most of them would stay and want to talk to us about movies and techniques and things like that. So,
Right.
Well, the thing I love about that and why Horror Hound as a convention helped us so much, as well as Days of the Dead, both of those conventions had invited us to take Nite Owl sort of more out of Ohio and have it more places in the country. And then also they would ask us to do, I think we did 6 episodes that were, I don't want to say commissioned by Horror Hound and Days of the Dead, but they were, I would have never done these movies had they not asked. So there were 6 of our episodes that were sort of, or 5 sanctioned by the conventions, and then 1, Ray Wise, the actor Ray Wise, who I work with now, is a, he wanted us to do RoboCop. He said, "I'll do RoboCop."
Oh, is that why we did
He
it?
said, "If you do RoboCop, I'll introduce it with you guys," and stuff like this, and that's why we did RoboCop. In fact, I booted out "Stand By Me" and Pink Floyd's "The Wall" to do RoboCop, which I still want to do The Wall. But anyway, but that was why we did RoboCop, which is still our newest episode to this date. But some of these conventions, they had us do the episodes because the stars of the conventions were there, or the stars of the movies were there and introed it with us. So it's been so great that we've met all the cast of the Lost Boys, including Kiefer. And then Fright Night, Chris Sarandon, Mick Garris, Sleepwalkers.
Didn't you do Warriors?
We did the Warriors with James Remar, introduced it with me. And then I think you shot that intro while we were doing that. And then and Remar, my intro when I brought Remar up was I said, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, a man that's so talented, Quentin Tarantino cast him as 2 roles in the same film, James Remar, because he plays a double role in Django." And so he liked that. And then the Reanimator, we did it with Barbara Crampton, Stuart Gordon, Jeffrey Combs, Bruce Abbott. They were all there. And
I'll tell you though, Jeffrey Combs and Bruce Abbott had to be the Dorian Grays of the 21st century. They looked exactly like they did in the movie, which was 20, 30 years old.
30 years old. Yeah, I mean, they haven't changed a bit. Stuart Gordon was the nicest man ever. He's since passed away. Brian Usna took the episode home and loved it. And so, it's just Brian Usna produced it. So it's just pretty cool to have been a movie fan as a kid, watching you. Have you been a movie fan? And then the two of us teaming up, and then having the actors from these films see what we do is a really cool feeling.
Well, I'm glad that you and my wife were correct in saying people will want to see, and it turned out terrifically.
Yeah,
it's been a pretty amazing ride. Apologies that the Channel 10 version of the show was. We'll dive more into that. Right now for a little bit, and then we're gonna wrap up. But basically, just thanks for watching all these years, and keep listening to the podcast. And every Friday night, same time, same channel, we're gonna be here, and we've got so many incredible things happening in 2024, which is the 50th anniversary of Nite Owl Theatre. We have different items coming out for the 50th. We're working on a book. We're working on. The coolest thing is there will be a Nite Owl Film Festival in Columbus in 2024, and we're going to go through every episode we ever made and show them theatrically one last time in 2024. So every week you'll be able to see the owl on the big screen, and make sure you come out for that. This is your chance to see everything.
Well, they'll get the audio version of the owl.
Yeah, they'll get the audio version. Right. But yeah, next year's is the big party. So if you're a Nite Owl fan, definitely get ready. And we're gonna just be a big year-long celebration of Fritz and his career and his incredible career.
And my thanks to all of you for all of the support over the years from 1959 to 2024.
And beyond.
And beyond,
Right.
yes.
Tune in every Friday night. We'll see you guys later. wntlchannelz.square.site for the merch to help keep us going. wntlchannelz.square.site. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.